She chose her career over our marriage, so I destroyed both. I exposed her affair to the CEO, filed for divorce, and watched them lose their jobs, their reputation, and each other. Her name is Vanessa. We met at 28. Married at 30. She was in marketing at a mid-sized pharmaceutical company when we got together. Smart, driven, the kind of person who walks into a room already thinking 3 steps ahead of whatever conversation is about to happen. I love that about her. For a long time I loved that about her. What I didn't fully understand until it was too late was the difference between ambition and displacement. Vanessa wasn't just driven toward things. She was driven away from things. The marriage. The conversations about what we were building together. The weekends that used to belong to us that slowly got absorbed into work trips and late nights and a laptop open at the dinner table. I raised it 6 times in 4 years. I know it was 6 because I kept a rough accounting in my head, the way you do when you're trying to be fair, when you're trying to make sure you're not the unreasonable one. 6 conversations where I said some version of, I feel like I'm losing you to this job and I need us to figure out what we're doing. 6 times she said she heard me. Said she'd recalibrate. Said the busy season was almost over, the big project was almost done, things would settle down. Things never settled down. The job changed. The project changed. The busy season rotated. But the result was always the same, which was a husband sitting across from a woman who was somewhere else even when she was in the room. By our 3rd anniversary I had accepted the possibility that this was just who she was. That the version of Vanessa I'd fallen in love with, the one who made time, who was present, who looked at me like I was part of her actual life, might have been a version that only existed before the career took full hold. I was wrong about that. It wasn't the career that had taken full hold. His name is Derek Holt. Senior Vice President of Business Development. Her direct superior for the last 2 years. 41 years old. Married with 2 kids in a suburb 40 minutes north of us. The kind of man who gets described as a leader in every performance review and a real family man at every company event. I found out about him the way I found out about most things that mattered in my marriage, not because Vanessa told me, but because I happened to be in the right place. She left her personal laptop open on the kitchen counter on a Tuesday afternoon in March. She was in the shower. I wasn't looking for anything. I walked past it on my way to get water and a notification banner came across the screen. His name. The preview text was 4 words. 4 words that told me everything. I stood in the kitchen for about 30 seconds. Then I sat down at the counter. The laptop was open and unlocked and I had a decision to make about what kind of person I was going to be in the next 5 minutes. I decided to be a thorough one. I had 20 minutes before she came out of the shower. I used all 20. What I found was not a recent situation. Not something new. The timestamps went back 11 months. 11 months of messages that established a relationship that was, by any standard, complete. Not an emotional entanglement heading somewhere. Not a flirtation that had crossed a line once or twice. A full, ongoing, deliberate relationship that had been running in parallel with our marriage for almost a year. I also found the business angle. This part matters. Derek wasn't just her lover. He was her manager. Which meant there was a power dynamic the company's HR policy addressed explicitly. I knew this because Vanessa had mentioned the policy before, in a different context, when a situation involving 2 other colleagues had come up at her company. She had said, at our kitchen table, that the policy was very clear and the company took it seriously. She had said that to me. In our kitchen. About other people. I closed the laptop. Put it back exactly where it was. Went to the living room. Sat down. When Vanessa came out of the shower she found me where I usually was. I said nothing about what I'd seen. She made dinner. We ate. I answered her questions about my day. I watched her be normal, and I catalogued that, and I went to bed. I did not sleep. But I did plan. The planning took 2 weeks. I am a project manager by profession. I manage large, complex, multi-stakeholder initiatives for a living. I understand timelines. I understand sequencing. I understand that the order in which you do things determines the outcome as much as the things themselves. So I did not act immediately. I gathered. I documented what I had seen. Screenshotted what I could access legitimately, the notification banner, the name, the timestamp visible on her screen before I opened anything, the sequence I'd observed. I wrote a clear, factual account of what I had discovered and when and how. Then I did something Vanessa would not have expected from me because she had never seen this version of me before. I consulted an attorney. Family law first. 2 conversations, 1 week apart. Understood the divorce landscape. Understood what I was entitled to, what the process looked like, what the timeline would be once I filed. Then I made a different call. I called the CEO of Vanessa's company. His name is Robert Callahan. He'd been CEO for 6 years. I had met him twice at company events. He knew my name. More importantly, I had his direct contact because Vanessa had given it to me 2 years ago in case of emergency when she was traveling internationally and her phone died. I never used it for that purpose. I used it for this one. I called on a Thursday morning. He answered on the 3rd ring. I said, Mr. Callahan, my name is Jonathan Park. My wife is Vanessa Park, she works in marketing. I have something I need to share with you that involves your company's HR policy and 2 of your employees. I need 30 minutes of your time. Silence for about 4 seconds. Then he said, where do you want to meet? We met the following Monday at a coffee shop near his office. Not at the company. Neutral ground. His choice. I brought a folder. Printed, organized, dated. A clear account of what I had observed. The timeline based on what I had seen. The message preview. The name. The approximate duration based on the timestamps visible in the notification. The relevant section of the company's HR policy, which I had pulled from the publicly available employee handbook on their website. I was not emotional. I was not there to be emotional. I was there to deliver information. Robert Callahan read through what I gave him without interrupting. When he finished, he looked up. He said, how long have you known about this? I said, 2 weeks. He said, why are you bringing this to me? I said, because your company has a policy that speaks directly to this situation. A relationship between a manager and a direct report. I'm not here to tell you what to do with that information. I'm here to make sure you have it. What you do with it is your business. He said, and you're filing for divorce. I said, I'm filing at the end of this week. He said, I see. He picked up the folder. Said he appreciated me coming to him directly. Said he'd handle it appropriately from here. I thanked him for his time. Paid for both coffees. Left. I filed that Friday. Vanessa did not know it was coming. She found out the way people find out these things when the other person has planned carefully, which is from an attorney's assistant calling to confirm service of process. She called me at 11 a.m. on Friday. I was at my desk. I let it go to voicemail. She called 3 more times in the next 2 hours. I let those go too. Then she texted. Said, we need to talk. I replied once. Said, my attorney will be in contact. She tried to call again. I had nothing else to say by phone. She came home at 6:30. I was in the kitchen. She walked in and put her bag down and looked at me with something I hadn't seen on her face in a long time, which was genuine alarm. She said, Jonathan, what is happening? I said, I found the messages on your laptop 3 weeks ago. I've already spoken to an attorney and I've filed. I've also spoken to Robert Callahan. The color left her face. I said, I know everything. The full timeline. Derek. All of it. I'm not interested in a conversation where you explain it. I'm not interested in the context. I've made my decisions and I'd like to handle the next steps through our attorneys. She said, you talked to Robert? I said yes. She said, Jonathan, do you understand what you just? I said, yes. I understand exactly what I did. She sat down at the kitchen table. She looked like a woman watching a very large structure collapse from the inside. Methodically. Section by section. I said, I'll stay in the guest room until we figure out the logistics. There's no need for any of this to get loud. I went to the guest room. Derek Holt was called into Robert Callahan's office the following Wednesday. I know the broad outline of what happened because Robert told me, briefly, in a text that said, the matter has been addressed per company policy. Both individuals have been notified. I won't be sharing further details, but I wanted you to know it was handled. Both individuals. Derek and Vanessa. Same day. Same policy. Same outcome. They were both gone by the end of that week. I found this out not from Robert, who had said all he was going to say, but from a woman named Claire who worked in Vanessa's department and texted me because she had my number from a company holiday party and apparently felt I deserved to know. She said, I don't know if you know what happened, but Vanessa cleared out her desk this afternoon. Derek too. I'm so sorry, Jonathan. I replied, thank you, Claire. I appreciate you telling me. Then I put my phone down and made dinner. Vanessa called me that night. I answered. This time I answered because I wanted to hear it directly. She said, I just want to know if you understood what you were doing when you went to Robert. I said, I understood exactly what I was doing. She said, you knew I'd lose my job. I said yes. She said, you did it anyway. I said yes. She said, Jonathan, that was 4 years of my career. That's my reputation in this industry. These people talk to each other. You know that. I said, you made choices for 11 months that you knew had professional consequences if they came out. You made them anyway. I just made sure they came out. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, I know I hurt you. I know that. But this. I said, Vanessa. You spent 4 years telling me in 100 different ways that this career was the most important thing in your life. You chose it over our marriage every single time there was a choice to make. And then you risked it for a man you worked with, for 11 months, in the same building, using the same laptop you left open on our kitchen counter. You made that risk. You decided that was worth it. I just made sure the risk you chose had the consequences it was always going to have. She said nothing. I said, my attorney will be in contact this week. I hung up. Derek's wife found out the same week Derek lost his job. I did not tell her. I want to be clear about that. I had considered it. I decided against it. What I did was put the information in front of Robert Callahan and let the company process do what company processes do, which includes documentation and HR records and the kind of paper trail that has a way of surfacing on its own. His wife found out through a combination of that paper trail and, from what I later heard, a conversation Derek had with her after he lost the job. He apparently told her something about the severance terms that required him to explain why the departure hadn't been on better terms. She filed within a month. I don't know her. I have nothing to say about her. What I know is that she deserved the truth about her own life the same way I deserved it about mine. She got it. What she does with it is entirely her business. The divorce proceedings took 7 months. Vanessa fought harder than I expected. I think losing the job had changed something in the calculation, made the settlement she walked away with feel more important because it was the only thing she'd be walking away with. Her attorney pushed on several points. Mine pushed back. We didn't have children. That simplified things. What we had was a house, 2 cars, investments, and 4 years of shared financial history that had to be untangled methodically. The house sold in month 4. We split the equity per the agreement. I found a 2-bedroom apartment downtown, signed a lease in month 5, moved my things on a Saturday with the help of 2 friends and a rented truck. Final signature was on a Thursday in October. 7 months after I filed. I signed at my attorney's office in the morning. Walked out into a clear October day. Went to work. Had a 2 p.m. call about a project deadline. Made dinner at home. Watched a show I'd been meaning to catch up on. That was the divorce. Derek and Vanessa lasted 4 months after they both lost their jobs. I know this because people talk. Not gossip, exactly. More like, information that finds you when it's relevant. A mutual contact mentioned it without knowing the full context of why I would find it relevant. Said she'd heard Derek and Vanessa had stopped seeing each other. Said something about the circumstances being complicated without having the specifics. I thought about that for a moment. 11 months of a relationship that operated in secret. With the structure of their careers holding it. The access. The proximity. The travel. The shared professional context that created the windows for everything they were doing. Take that structure away, and what you have is 2 unemployed people in their late 30s who destroyed their marriages for each other and have to figure out if what they had was real outside of a conference room and a company calendar. Apparently it wasn't. I can't say I was surprised. What they had was specific to the container it lived in. The container is gone. Without it, what they actually were to each other became visible. And what they actually were to each other, apparently, was not enough. Here is what Vanessa's professional situation looks like now. She found a new position 4 months after leaving. Different company. Lower title. Meaningful step back from where she was. The pharmaceutical industry is smaller than it looks from the outside, and the circumstances of her departure were not a secret to everyone who needed to be in the room when she interviewed. She's working. She's functional. I don't wish her destitution. What I wanted was accuracy. I wanted the consequences she had avoided for 11 months to find her. Not ruin. Accuracy. She had told me, in our marriage, that her career was the most important thing. She had organized her life around it. She had let the marriage become a supporting structure for it. And then she had risked it, for almost a year, for a man she worked with. And the career she had chosen over everything else was the first thing to go. That's not something I did to her. That's the consequence she built herself by making the choices she made in the order she made them. I just ensured the timeline played out the way it was always going to play out. A little sooner. A little more completely. That's all. People ask me about the CEO meeting. That's always the part people want to understand. They say, weren't you worried about how it would look? Didn't you feel like you were weaponizing the professional situation? Wasn't there something calculated about walking into that man's office with a folder? And the honest answer to all of those questions is yes. Yes, I was calculated. Yes, it was deliberate. Yes, I understood exactly how it would look, and I decided I was comfortable with how it looked. Here is what I know about Vanessa. The career was the thing she would feel most. Not the marriage ending. She had been ending the marriage slowly for years with every choice she made. The marriage ending was almost a relief to her, I think, in some way she'd never have admitted. She had built a life that was moving away from the marriage whether I filed or not. The marriage ending didn't take anything from Vanessa that she hadn't already been moving away from. The career. That was the thing she had chosen. That was the thing she had organized her identity around. That was what she had gotten out of bed for every morning in a way she hadn't been getting out of bed for me in years. I didn't take it. She put it at risk herself. I just made sure the risk landed. My father asked me once if I had any regrets about how I handled it. I thought about it for a genuine moment. Not a performative pause. A real one. Then I said, no. He said, none of it. Not even the CEO. I said, especially not the CEO. He said, why especially? I said, Because I spent 4 years raising concerns in a marriage and being told they'd been heard and watching nothing change. I spent 4 years being the person who adjusted, who recalibrated, who made room. I was patient. I was fair. I gave the benefit of the doubt more times than I should have. When I found out what was actually happening, I stopped being patient. I stopped being fair in the direction of people who hadn't been fair to me. I gathered information, I consulted professionals, and I made informed decisions. That's not rage. That's not revenge in the dramatic sense. That's just someone who finally had complete information and used it accurately. My father said, "Your grandfather would have liked you." I said, "I know." Here is what I want you to understand about the 4 years. It wasn't a bad marriage in the way people mean when they say a bad marriage. There was no screaming. No cruelty. No dramatic breaking points. What it was, for me, was a slow disappearance. Vanessa was always present enough that I couldn't point to an absence. But she was never fully there. Always one step removed. Always with half her attention on the next thing at work. Always managing me slightly, the way you manage someone you need to keep calm while you focus on what you actually care about. I raised it 6 times. 6 conversations where I said I'm losing you to this. 6 times she said she heard me. She heard me. She just didn't change anything. Because changing something would have required acknowledging that what I was saying was true. And acknowledging it was true would have meant acknowledging what she was choosing. She was choosing the career. She was choosing Derek. She was choosing the life she had decided she wanted while maintaining the appearance of the life she had said she wanted. I was the appearance. Once I understood that, everything else followed naturally. I'm doing well. I want to say that because it's true and because I think people need to hear that the story ends somewhere livable. I'm in the downtown apartment. A building with a gym I actually use, which is more than I could say about the house. I have a standing Thursday night dinner with 2 friends from college. I got back into reading, which I had let go during the marriage in favor of shows Vanessa wanted to watch. I'm reading actual books now. 3 so far this year. Work is good. A major project wrapped last month. My team handled it well. I took the team out for dinner to celebrate. Sat at a long table in a restaurant and looked down the row of people I'd worked with for years and felt, genuinely, content. Not every day is like that. Some days the 4 years still show up in unexpected places. A song that was playing during a trip we took. A restaurant we used to go to that I walked past and then walked past faster. Normal stuff. It shows up and then it passes. I went on a date in August. A woman named Sandra I met through a colleague. Dinner. Good conversation. She asked smart questions. We went out again the following weekend. It's early. I have no particular agenda about it. I'm just being present, which is something I know how to do now in a way I had started to forget when I was in a marriage to someone who never fully was. Derek Holt has a new job in a different industry. I know this because LinkedIn exists and I am not above occasionally checking what the man who spent 11 months sleeping with my wife is doing professionally. He's in consulting now. Smaller firm. Different sector. The kind of pivot you make when the industry you are in knows your name for the wrong reasons. His LinkedIn says he's passionate about driving organizational growth and delivering strategic value. Same as every other LinkedIn. His wife, I've heard, is doing fine. Rebuilding. Her call whether to rebuild with him or without him, and I hear she made a decision, but I don't need the specifics. Vanessa tried to reach me twice after the divorce was final. The first time was in November. 2 weeks after the final signature. She texted. Said she wasn't looking to relitigate anything. Said she just wanted to say she was sorry. Said she had done a lot of thinking and there were things she wished she'd done differently. I read it. I did not reply. The second time was in February. An email. Longer. More detailed. She talked about the 4 years. About the things she could see now that she couldn't see then. About the way she had been managing the marriage from a distance without admitting to herself that was what she was doing. About what she had sacrificed and what she had thought it was worth and what she understood now about that calculation. It was honest, as far as I could tell. More honest than most things she had said to me in the last 2 years of the marriage. I read it twice. Then I archived it. I don't have anything to say in response. Not because I'm punishing her with silence. Because I genuinely don't have anything to say. The conversation is over. We had it, through attorneys, for 7 months. The last word was a judge's signature in an October morning outside my attorney's office. What she understands now about the choices she made is useful to her future. It's not useful to mine. Here is what I learned. Patience is not the same as passivity. I was patient with Vanessa for 4 years. I raised the concerns. I gave the benefit of the doubt. I waited for things to change. That patience was real and it was the right approach for as long as the situation warranted it. When the situation changed, when I found out that the distance I had been told was about work was about something else entirely, the patience ended. And when patience ends, what's left is information and decision-making. I had the information. I made the decisions. I made them calmly and completely and in the correct sequence. I consulted the people who needed to be consulted. I filed when I was ready to file. I walked into a coffee shop with a folder and I put it on the table. The results were the results. Some people call what I did calculated. I accept that description. Some people call it cold. I accept that too. What I call it is accurate. She had chosen her career over our marriage. She had risked her career for a man who wasn't me. The career she had chosen over everything was the thing I made sure she felt. That's not revenge. That's just making sure the consequences you built actually reach you. My attorney, at the end of our last meeting, said something I've thought about since. She said, in 11 years of family law I've had maybe 4 clients who came in this prepared and this clear. Most people come in a mess. You came in with a folder. I said, I manage projects for a living. She said, you managed this one well. I said, I had a good reason too. She shook my hand. I thanked her for her work. I went home. The folder. People ask about the folder. What was in it? Whether I had more than I've said. Whether there was something I used that I haven't mentioned. Here's what was in the folder. A printed account of what I observed on the afternoon I found the laptop open. The timestamp on the notification. His name. The preview text, 4 words, that told me what I needed to know. The approximate date range based on what I could see. The HR policy language pulled from the public website. Nothing more. That was enough. That was enough because Robert Callahan was already a thorough man running a company with a clear policy. He didn't need me to hand him a full case. He needed the door to be opened. I opened it. He walked through it himself and found everything else. That's how these things work when the underlying situation is what it is. You don't need to hand someone a verdict. You just need to hand them the first piece. The rest follows from the thing itself. She chose her career over our marriage. She had been choosing it for 4 years. Small choices, then larger ones, then the largest one, which was deciding that the man who asked her 6 times to come back to the marriage wasn't worth the cost of actually doing it. She chose the career. And then she chose to risk the career for a man in the same building. And when I found out, I made a choice of my own. I chose accuracy over silence. I chose a folder and a meeting and a filing over swallowing it. I chose to make sure that the career she had chosen over everything else was the first consequence she felt. She lost the career. She lost Derek. She lost the marriage and the house and 4 years of professional positioning. I lost a marriage I'd already been losing for years. Then I went home. Made dinner. Signed a lease on an apartment I like. And started getting on with the life I'm actually supposed to be living. The folder is in a box somewhere in the closet. I don't need it anymore. The results are already the results. I don't think about it much. Most days not at all.